fact, annual global sales of electric and plug-in hybrid vehicles are forecast to reach almost 30 million cars by 2030. However, this will require urgently setting standards for plugs and safety, rolling out new infrastructure, and investing even more in research. If we don't get our act together fast, other countries will leave us behind. Growth also needs to be inclusive and fair. We want as many of our people to have quality employment, and we need to ensure that the benefits of growth are widely shared. A rising tide should lift all boats. We therefore resolve to fight poverty and social exclusion with determination. Europe 2020 is a long-term strategy. We need to decide on it now so that necessary investments can be made and so that structural changes can be delivered in our economies. But of course, the here and now is weighing heavily in our minds. The crisis has shown the need for greater economic governance and coordination at European level. This will be a priority for next week's European Council. In the shorter term, Europe needs to make a success of our exit from the crisis. That requires action to curb high levels of public debt, and we'll need to coordinate a carefully sequenced withdrawal of support measures once economic recovery is self-sustaining and once financial stability is restored. The Commission will continue its work to reform financial markets and return them to the service of the economy and of our citizens. We have put a range of proposals on the table. Others are under preparation. At next week's European Council, I will again stress the need to keep up the pace and the ambition of delivery here. The EU has to a large part set the G20 agenda and can be well ahead of the rest at international level. An immediate priority is getting early agreement on our new supervisory arrangements so that the European Systemic Risk Board and the trio supervisory authorities can start their work at the beginning of 2011. The critical question is, of course, how to put this vision of a smart, sustainable, inclusive economy into practice. What reforms must we undertake? What role should the European Union play? How are we going to be sure of success? The road to 2020, as your pamphlet is named, will not be an easy one. Exhortation will not do. We will need to take bold action and make tough choices, and financial constraints will severely limit our policy options. In other words, we must do more with less. So while I'm under no illusions about the challenges, my message is that Europe can do it, and that's the message I'm conveying to some of the reluctant members of the European Union. We have risen to the occasion before. I believe Europe now has here an opportunity also of doing it. Achieving the 2020 goal will depend on concrete action, but first we need to define where we want to be. Only then can we measure whether we are moving in the right direction at the right pace. The Commission has therefore proposed 5 2020 targets. I think you are familiar with it. I'm not going to repeat them. They have to do with employment, with R&D, with energy and climate, with education, with the fight against poverty. But while these are EU targets, they are not one-size-fits-all targets. They should be broken down by Member States into national targets reflecting very different starting positions. Transposing targets into a national context should also increase the accountability and ownership for their achievement. Target setting is a first step. Then we need to take decisive action at both Member State and EU level to meet them. The strategy therefore sets out a limited number of major flagship initiatives. I think you know them. I'm not going to take more of time about it, but they are very important, from, of course, skills and new jobs to innovation, to a digital single market, to a resource-efficient economy, to the reinforcement of social cohesion. In order to complement and reinforce these major initiatives, we will mobilize all our horizontal instruments at European level in support of Europe 2020. This includes giving a new impetus to the single market, reforming the European Union budget, and revising the EU's external trade policy to create more opportunities in third markets. Strong discipline and the right toolkit will be required to ensure delivery and implementation. But good governance starts with sound leadership, and that is why I'm asking heads of state and government to take charge of this new strategy. This is, I hope, an occasion as we have never before. It's more about politics, the politics of having an agreement on policies. I can tell you about my experience and how the context is different when I discuss these issues today and how I discussed this issue 5 years ago when it was renewal of the Lisbon strategy. I believe now there is much more a sense of urgency, also because of the globalization factor than it was before. That's why we are asking Member States not to see the 2020 strategy as the Brussels strategy for them, somewhere in Brussels, but for their own strategy, the ownership. We are insisting very much on this, and I hope we will succeed. So it is right for the European Council to steer, based of course on proposal of the Commission, but for the Council to steer a structural reform strategy. But it is up to all stakeholders to take responsibility for its delivery. Business leaders, social partners, local, regional governments, individual citizens, academia, all have a part to play. Everybody needs to get into the boat and row, don't just stand on the riverbank and complain. However, a new governance structure also means more rigorous surveillance and reporting of member states' reform efforts. Some have advocated sanctions to penalize slow reformers. I think this is the wrong starting point. The best motivation for governments to reform is that it will make their countries more successful. However, the Commission will issue candid advice to ensure that all Member States' reform efforts are contributing to the common European good. If necessary, the Commission will be ready to issue policy warnings to Member States, as provided for the Lisbon Treaty. The Lisbon Treaty creates new mechanisms that we had not before. I'd like to finish with a few reflections on the CER Lisbon scorecard. Our collective reform effort will only be successful if we move broadly at the same pace. It is therefore essential for Member States to know how they are performing relative to one another. Similarly, we agree that Europe 2020 must be more outward focused than its precursor strategy. In a globalized economy, it therefore makes sense for the EU to benchmark its own performance against that of its main partners or competitors. I am therefore ready to propose an advanced system of monitoring for European Union structural reforms, which will include both internal and external benchmarking, and which will place a significant emphasis on peer review. However, in common with all the policies I have described today, the final decision on Europe 2020 must be taken by heads of state and government, and I therefore look forward to their deliberations next week. We are doing our part of the job, but in fact, this is a shared responsibility. And so I can tell you that I will go, we express to heads of state and government this sense of urgency about the opportunity there is now, and that Europe should not miss these opportunities. Thank you for your attention.